The Desert Healthcare District and Foundation presents a podcast that supports your health and wellness where you live. This is Healthy Desert, Healthy You, hosted by Will Dean. Now, here's Will.
Hello friends, welcome to another episode of Healthy Desert, Healthy You. My guest today is Gabriel. He is the Executive Director at Live to Rise. And Live to Rise is a coalition of more than 70 partners with a bold plan to increase housing affordability in the Coachella Valley. I am excited that Ian is with us today because he is also going to be a panelist at the 3rd Annual Healthy Desert, Healthy You Summit on September 10 in Rancho Mirage. Live to Rise has been a longtime partner and grantee of the Desert Healthcare District and Foundation, which is putting on the summit. Ian is going to be participating as a panelist. His panel is titled Integrating Housing and Healthcare Systems, Effective Approaches to Improve Stability and Health. Welcome, Ian.
Thank you, Will. Appreciate it. And I just wanted to thank the Desert Healthcare District and Foundation for your longtime support of Live to Rise and your longtime partnership. I'm happy to be here.
Absolutely. I know you guys are doing such great work, so I'm going to start with a pretty basic, bold question. How do you define affordable housing?
That is a great question because I think there are a lot of different definitions out there. So we look at it through a couple of lenses. The first is we would consider that a family or a household is able to afford their housing if they're spending less than 30% of their income on their housing costs, whether that's rent or their mortgage. That doesn't really depend on income level, but if you are spending less than 30% of your income on your housing, you can afford your housing by our definition. And then we also focus on getting affordable housing built here in the Coachella Valley. And the way that we define that affordable housing in that sense is that it's affordable to households making 80% of area median income or less. And that's more of a standard definition that is set by the federal government and the state government. But essentially, the area median income for Riverside County, San Bernardino County is set every year, and then we define housing affordability or affordable units as affordable to folks making 80% of that limit. So
Okay.
There's a specific income definition, but in general, when we talk about whether or not you can afford your housing, you're spending no more than 30% of your income on your housing costs.
All right, thank you for that. And I was on your website, which I encourage everyone to visit. There's a lot of great information, livetorize.org. And I was struck by, you have a pretty ambitious goal.
We do.
I believe it's to reduce the burden of housing expense by 30%.
Correct.
By, creating 10,000 housing units by 2028.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, I agree. It's a bold goal. We set this goal together with a number of partners in 2018, and the idea was to have a goal that would impact folks here in the Coachella Valley at the population level instead of, a small goal that would only impact a few folks. So yeah, the goal is producing 10,000 units of affordable housing over 10 years. Right now, we're in the final 2 years of that 10-year span, and we've been making tremendous progress. So at this point, almost all of those units have been identified in terms of there's a plan for them. They're at some stage of the development process, ranging from the land is identified and there's a developer that we know is going to be working on that project all the way to completed and with folks actually living in those units. So there's a whole range of different stages of the development process, and we're tracking development of units across all of those stages of development. And I will say, Live to Rise, we ourselves are not a developer, so we're not actually building the affordable housing ourselves. What we're doing is we're bringing together a coalition of partners, which includes developers, local cities, stakeholders, funders, to really work on a plan together to sort of combine our capacities and resources to see that goal move forward. And so it's really the contribution of a whole network of partners that has enabled that increase in affordable housing that we've seen. And just for context, prior to 2018, when we set this goal together, the Coachella Valley saw an average of about 38 units of affordable housing being produced per year. 38 per year, which means that in some years there was 0 or less than 38, other years more. Now our average sort of annual production rate is upwards of 1,600 units per year. So we've seen a tremendous increase, and it has a lot to do with the hard work of all of our partners and the coordination and collaboration that we've been able to steward as Lift to Rise is sort of the backbone of this initiative.
So what I do know about Lift to Rise is that you guys are really great about bringing people together. You talk about the coalition of partners.
Exactly.
I've actually seen that. But the 10,000 units, so that's not all new construction, right?
Most of it is. Yeah.
Most of it is, okay.
Yeah. So we do include some sort of rehabilitation units, so older properties that need some repairs or need to be sort of renewed in terms of their affordability contracts, but predominantly new construction.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's really impressive.
And it spans multifamily, it includes rental units, it includes single-family homeownership options, it includes mobile home parks and Polanco parks. So there's really a range and sort of a diversity of options of affordable housing that we would consider in our overall regional pipeline that we're tracking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's talk about big picture of housing affordability in the Coachella Valley. What would you say are the major, or have been the major challenges, impediments to actually creating this type of housing?
Yeah. So I would say the big sort of challenges are funding, obviously.
Always.
That's true across sectors for sure. I think when you get into what is unique about our region and with respect to funding is, first of all, there's not enough funding at the state level or at the federal level for affordable housing to begin with. And to build quality housing using public sources of funding, which is generally how affordable housing in the state and across the country gets built, it ends up being more expensive than just regular market rate housing to build. But what using some of the public sources of funding allows for is guaranteed affordability. So the units that we're working on with our partners to get built, basically once a resident moves in, they're guaranteed to spend no more than 30% of their income based on their lease. And so it really ensures that the housing is actually affordable long-term for folks as opposed to being subject to market forces. But anyway, back to funding. The way the funding works in the state of California, generally speaking, for affordable housing is it's dispersed by the state through various programs. There's also local funding involved, some federal funding, but the bulk of the funding comes from the state. And the way that they distribute the funding is through different programs that have different rules. The programs that exist to fund affordable housing in the state of California often prioritize dense areas of the state, areas with a lot of public transportation infrastructure, places more like Los Angeles, the Bay Area, so the more dense coastal areas. On the flip side, areas like the Coachella Valley, which are inland, more spread out, have less public transportation infrastructure, often end up getting sort of the short end of the stick when it comes to funding from the state. And so a lot of the projects and the developers that are trying to build affordable housing often have a hard time competing for state resources. So that's one of the things that Lift to Rise is trying to address through our policy work at the state level, is trying to ensure that projects here in the Coachella Valley and the Inland Empire more broadly have their fair share of resources available to them to build affordable housing. So I would say funding is the key barrier. Another one is infrastructure. So this is especially true in the more rural parts of the Coachella Valley, eastern Coachella Valley, North Palm Springs, Desert Hot Springs, where obviously in order for a affordable housing development or any housing development to house people, you need access to electricity, you need access to water and sewer. And these are improvements that cost a lot of money to create and are not just there necessarily. So especially in the rural areas, we really need to work on building more what we call housing supportive infrastructure to enable the construction of affordable housing in some of those areas where there are a lot of folks and people living there that need housing, but the infrastructure just isn't there yet. So both the funding and infrastructure pieces are built into our action plan, which you had mentioned. And that's sort of our roadmap over the next 2 years to our finishing out our 10-year goal. And then just the last one, I would say, one of the things that I'm really proud of at Lift to Rise and the work that we do is that we really keep community residents at the center of our work. So I would say one impediment, which is pretty common, I would say, across the state to affordable housing development, it's not really an impediment to production, but decisions about funding and decisions about development usually get made by elected officials, funders, and community members are often left out of those decisions, even though it really impacts them on the day-to-day and their daily lives. We've really been intentional about including and incorporating residents, building up resident leadership, and we have a network of over 100 resident leaders active right now in the Coachella Valley that we've been working with for years, who are really the boots on the ground advocates for more affordable housing here in the Coachella Valley. They show up to planning commission meetings, city council meetings, they advocate in Sacramento with us for more affordable housing, and they're able to contribute ideas as to what is the housing that would actually make a difference in their lives, what is the kind of housing that they want to see, and then we're able to take that information and include it in our plan. So I think those three elements you'll see if you look at our action plan on liftrise.org. You'll see the resident leadership, the funding, and the infrastructure are really key elements. And then we also have a policy strategy and communications and narrative strategy as well. So we're working on all those issues all at once, all in a coordinated way with our partners towards getting to that goal.
Wow. So affordable housing is more than just building
Yes,
an
definitely.
apartment building or a home. There's so much more involved.
Exactly.
I'm curious about the resident leaders. Is that a voluntary position, or are they paid, or?
Yeah, so there's some opportunities for, we're very intentional about making sure that we compensate participants for participating in this effort, because they're taking time out of their day. Sometimes folks are traveling all the way from Thermal Oasis to our office in Palm Desert for events. And so, but the point I think really is we've identified folks that are really already active in their communities and are already community champions. And we're also investing in them in other ways as well. So we recently did what we called a Leadership Academy. So we ran 6-month training programs for these about 100 residents that participated. And we're able to essentially teach them skills about community organizing, civic engagement, public speaking, storytelling, ways that will really skills that they can use for advocacy for affordable housing, but also just other issues that they care about in their community, and then can use those in other outlets in their life. So we invest in the residents that we work with in several different ways. Yeah.
Oh, right, so it sounds like a great opportunity for people who are already advocating for community.
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah. And we have we call them committees by cities. We have active groups in Palm Springs, La Quinta, Coachella, Indio, and Desert Hot Springs right now, and we're moving into expanding that footprint as well over the next year.
Okay, so I'm going to shift gears a little bit. So I mentioned earlier that you're going to be at the summit, the Health Summit,
Yes.
in September 10th, 2026. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the intersection of health and housing, because I think maybe there's a lot of people who don't know what that is. And I've heard about the Housing First model, which basically, and correct me if I'm wrong, but basically says if you have safe and secure housing, then you're likely to have better outcomes in terms of your health and so many other things.
Correct.
So talk a little bit about the importance of that intersection.
Yeah, so we definitely as an organization believe in the Housing First model. I think it really primarily applies to folks that are unhoused, and the theory is that folks that are unhoused often are dealing with other kinds of issues, whether that's substance use disorder or mental health or health issues. Maybe it's trouble accessing employment. These are all issues that are not specific to housing necessarily, but it's a lot harder to find a job or deal with your addiction or get health treatment if you're not stably housed. So the Housing First model really says the first step that we need to take for these folks that have high needs and a lot of needs like that is get them stably housed, and then from there that provides that stable foundation for addressing those issues. So I think the Housing First model is very important, and there are definitely units that are underway, projects underway in the Coachella Valley that really rely on that model. I will also say that, like I spoke about earlier, in order to address this affordable housing crisis that we're facing in the state and here locally, we're going to need a variety of types of housing to actually meet the needs of everyone. Not everyone is going to need permanent supportive housing, which means a rental unit that's connected to healthcare and addiction treatment and other services. Some folks just need a little boost. Maybe the interim housing or something like the Palm Springs Navigation Center is what they would actually need just temporarily until they can get themselves on their feet to another situation. Other folks are not unhoused, but they're struggling to pay rent. And they're working families, teachers, hospitality workers, farm workers, folks that are really the backbone of the Coachella Valley economy that are really just struggling to afford rent. So we want to be able to create options for them as well, and they need affordable housing as well. So I think the Housing First model is really important, but it should be considered one tool in a broader toolbox of options that we have, and we need to. It's on us as a sector, as nonprofits and local governments and the state government to really provide folks with a broad array of options that can really meet everybody's housing needs. So that's kind of how we look at the pipeline of projects that we are tracking across the region. We want to make sure that it's not just one type of housing, because we know there's so many different kinds of scenarios and situations and folks that are in need of stable housing.
Would you say that the majority of people in the Valley who are experiencing the housing burden are not the unhoused, but people who are just find it difficult to make those payments, pay that rent? And
I would say it's predominantly folks, low-income households that are just seeing, housing costs continuing to rise. The supply has historically been pretty low of affordable housing, so there are not many options, and their wages haven't increased at the same rate as housing costs have. Home ownership is also an important piece of the puzzle. We talk to community residents a lot. We do listening sessions and focus groups, and homeownership is something that comes up all the time. Folks feel like at this point, especially younger folks who are, maybe left the Valley to go to college and are coming back, they are having a really hard time finding anything that's affordable to really sort of invest in their future and have that sort of generational wealth creation that homeownership provides. So we're really looking into strategies to spark homeownership as well as we move forward in our plan. But I would say the folks that we're predominantly working with are, they're not unhoused, they're farm workers, hospitality workers, landscapers, folks that are in healthcare and teachers, public service employees, local government employees. So a lot of the folks that I think, we kind of need a reset on the narrative of who is actually needed, who actually needs affordable housing in our communities, because I think there's a perception that our efforts are just for folks who are experiencing homelessness or the unhoused, which is part of it, but it doesn't paint the full picture.
Right. It's really all connected, because I think about the Desert Healthcare District and Foundation and the work we're doing to increase the healthcare workforce to bring people in.
Right.
But if there's not the affordable housing for them, then that's definitely a challenge in that regard as well.
Yeah.
All right.
Definitely.
So is it fair to ask which communities in the Valley are experiencing the greatest affordable housing need?
I think it's fair to ask. My answer to that would be the need is everywhere. It just looks different depending on the community. Mm-hmm. We try to focus on all communities here in the Coachella Valley. Our coalition of partners, which we call the Housing Collaborative Action Network, which meets monthly and works through our action plan and implements the strategies that we've come up together. It includes representation from all 9 Coachella Valley cities plus unincorporated communities here, the county of Riverside, residents from across the valley as well. So I think there are diverse communities here in the valley, but we are one valley, and we need to approach this as a regional problem. The scale is at a level that we need to think about it regionally as opposed to city by city. And I also want to say, this is not an impossible thing to solve. The situation we're in, the housing crisis we're in, is a result of a set of choices that we've made as a society, as where we decide to put our money as a society, the priorities we have in terms of budget, and who we deem deserving of support. And we know that we can do this together, and the Coachella Valley has made a lot of progress already in the past, I would say, 10 years, and it's actually an example that a lot of folks across the state and country are looking to now for how do we make this happen. And I think the key is recognizing that we all have a responsibility to solve this issue, and having a clarity and understanding about what everybody's role is in solving this issue. I think folks tend to say, this is just the responsibility of the private market, or this is just the responsibility of local government to fix. But no, actually everybody, regardless of where you sit, has a role to play in solving this issue, and I think it's our collective responsibility to solve it together.
You're clearly very passionate about your work. Where does this come from? Did it start with your joining Live to Rise, or have you always been interested in housing?
No, so actually my journey in the affordable housing world started when I lived in downtown Los Angeles, very close to the Skid Row neighborhood, which is sort of the epicenter of homelessness in Los Angeles. And actually at the time a couple friends of mine and I had a magazine that we produced called Get Downtown, which focused on arts and culture and urban issues in downtown LA. And we did a whole issue devoted to art coming from residents of the Skid Row neighborhood. And through that effort, I ended up interviewing and meeting a ton of people in that community. and really got inspired to get more involved with some of the great organizations and grassroots efforts that are occurring in Skid Row neighborhood that are fighting for the rights of the unhoused and just generally affordable housing more broadly. And from there, I got connected to several campaigns and organizations and got more involved. And then eventually I realized this is a systemic level issue. This is a policy issue at the end of the day. And I want to get some more expertise and training on what that entails. So I ended up going to graduate school for public policy at USC. And there I did a lot of research on housing and homelessness. So I kind of saw it from the research side. And then after grad school, I got connected to Lift to Rise. And from there, I think I've just been incredibly lucky to be able to be part of an organization that really puts the residents of the Coachella Valley at the center and is, we're actually able to see the fruits of our labor. We're making a lot of progress. I recently did a tour of some of the affordable housing projects that Lift to Rise has been able to fund. And it's just mind-blowing to see that, when I started this job 6 years ago, none of these buildings existed. And now there's permanent structures there that are continuously housing folks and improving people's lives. And so it's really great, inspiring to see both the resident leadership that has grown and sort of the community commitment to this issue that we've been able to cultivate alongside of our partners, and also just the lasting permanence of the buildings that we've helped get built.
Oh, that's really encouraging. So I want to ask a couple of questions about how residents can get involved. For the residents who may be watching this or listening to it, and they're not experiencing the housing burden, how can they support Lift to Rise?
Great question. There's a lot of ways you could get connected. So I would say, first of all, sign up for our newsletter on lifttorise.org. We periodically, every month, we put out information about opportunities for engagement, advocacy. We recognize that folks have varying levels of capacity to be able to participate in efforts like this. Even if you sign your name on a petition for a state bill, that can make a lot of difference. But we also have opportunities for folks to join our resident-led initiatives, like the Committees by Cities, which I mentioned before, which would plug you into more direct advocacy at the local and state level. So that's one way. I think sharing our message on social media is another way that folks can really spread the word about our work. We also are a nonprofit, so we always need funding, and again, very grateful to the Healthcare District and Foundation for your generous funding over the years. But we also do rely on donations from community members, and that's a really important source of funding because that allows us to be flexible and creative with the stuff that we do and responsive to emergencies or needs that arise that we haven't anticipated. So lifttorise.org is a place where you could donate as well. And then I think for folks that are in maybe the nonprofit or public sector space, but you're not maybe directly involved in housing particularly, but maybe you're in healthcare or education or workforce development, we also have opportunities with our Housing Collaborative Action Network to become part of this broader coalition, because it's not just housing professionals that are working on this, it really is everyone. And there's, we have childcare folks, we have healthcare folks, education folks. So I think don't feel limited by just the housing thing. If you want to see positive change here in the Coachella Valley for the residents of the Coachella Valley, there's a place for you within our Housing Collaborative Action Network as well. So I think just go on our website and reach out, contact at lifttorise.org or info@lifttorise.org, and we'll get you in touch with the appropriate team member.
Yeah, it sounds like you have a lot of opportunities for people to support. For people in the community, residents in the community who are experiencing that housing burden, what is the first thing they should do?
I think you could call us, you can come by our office. We have relationships with a lot of different types of direct service providers and local governments who have programs and services that folks can access. So we're kind of oftentimes sort of the front door. We don't often provide those services ourselves, but we realize it's very important to have those relationships with our partners that can provide those services, and we're often that sort of conduit for those relationships with residents. So I would say reach out to us. Also, a lot of the local governments here in the Valley have their own programs and services available for folks experiencing housing instability or who are unhoused. Palm Springs, for example, here where we are today, has some programs that folks can access that have been really effective over the years. And so I would say reach out to us or reach out to your local government.
Excellent. Is there anything else that you would want our viewers or listeners to know about that I have not asked you?
I would just say that, sort of reiterate what I shared earlier, is that this is something that we can do together and we can solve, and everyone has a role to play. And while it seems like an insurmountable challenge, if we go at it together in a strategic and coordinated way, which is how Lift to Rise does things, we can change the world together, and it's very possible to achieve what we need and make sure that our residents here in the Coachella Valley are thriving.
It's a great note to end on. Thank you, Ian.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Thank you, Ian, for being with us today. For more about the great work that Ian is doing, please visit lifttorise.org. And if you want to learn more about the summit coming up on September 10, please visit our website at healthydeserthealthyyou.com. Be well, everyone.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of Healthy Desert, Healthy You. This podcast is a production of the Desert Healthcare District and Foundation in Palm Springs, California. For more information, please visit the website dhcd.org. Our annual conference site is healthydeserthealthyyou.com. This podcast is available at most major podcast portals, including Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Audible, Captivate.fm, Spotify, and YouTube Music. Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe.